Welcome to Zone Coverage. We're Stewart's TV and Appliance in the Sub-Zero Wolf Kitchen for our weekly look at everything having to do with the Cleveland Browns. I'm Scott Petrak, Browns beat writer for the Chronicle-Telegram, Medina Gazette, and BrownsZone.com. This is Jim Ingraham, our sports columnist. Well, Jim, the Browns finished a winless home season, which I guess happens when you're winless overall, on Sunday with a 27-10 loss to the Ravens. I think it played out like a lot of people thought it would. The Browns were outclassed against a big-time Ravens defense and a veteran quarterback in Joe Flacco. Hugh Jackson apologized to the fans for the winless home season, and then he walked out of First Energy Stadium 1-29 in his 2 years with the Browns. Let's start with a simple question. Do you think Hugh Jackson's back for 2018?
Do I think he'll be back?
Yeah.
Possibly. Do I think he should be back? No. I mean, if Vince Lombardi was 1-31, he would have gotten fired. And not that anyone likes to see anybody get fired, but
Sure.
I mean, his record is what it is. And I know he didn't have the best of talent to deal with, but I mean, I don't see how you can possibly bring that back and try to sell tickets to the fans and corporate sponsors and all that stuff with that kind of a record.
I think you can make excuses for Hugh, and I've done it. You know, the roster isn't good enough. Quarterback plays terrible. You're turning the ball over as much as they have. But it is. It's hard to get past that record, right? I mean, that's what football comes down to. Bill Parcells always said you are what your record is. So 1-29, so that's why I can't argue with anyone who says Hugh Jackson should be fired, even if I don't think he's most to blame for the 1-29 record. But then the interesting kind of subplot is, all this speculation about Cincinnati. Marvin Lewis is not going to be back as head coach. At least that's what we're hearing. And Mike Brown, the president down there, likes Hugh Jackson. He had him as a coordinator. They have a good relationship. Can you imagine Cincinnati hiring a coach that conceivably could be 1-31?
You wouldn't think so. I mean, his record's going to be what it is wherever he goes after this. But if there was a team, maybe it would be Cincinnati, where the owner likes him. And when you think about it, everyone wins if this were to happen.
Right.
I mean, he can leave here gracefully if that's possible. He can go to a place where he's known and respected, and they like him there, and it gets them out from under his record so that John Dorsey can go hire his own coach, and it's almost then you get a clean break and a clean start and see where it goes. But it seems like this is just almost set up for them. But whether it happens or not, we'll have to wait and see.
Right, and the second part of that is Cincinnati would want him, would have to want him, and I'm just not convinced of that. I'm not convinced Mike Brown, given the coaches he could hire, would stick with Hugh Jackson, given that record. So let's assume the Browns keep him, because I think he winds up here. I don't know why Jimmy Haslam, the owner, only 2 weeks ago would have been so strong about bringing back Hugh Jackson when it was a perfect time to say, you know what, let's get Hugh Jackson and John Dorsey get to know each other. Take some time. We'll reevaluate after the season. And they were 0-12. So there's no rush. There's no need to guarantee, and it felt like a guarantee to me, that Hugh Jackson will be back. So if he is back, do you think he is the kind of coach that could win if he had, quote-unquote, real players?
Just real quick, this just occurred to me right now. If you want to keep Hugh, why not just make him the offensive coordinator and then go hire a coach? Then, you're not blowing it up totally. He's staying with the team. And he's doing probably what he should be doing only, and then you bring in a new coach and you could do it that way. So that would be one possible way. And I think that overall, just it's hard to imagine if he's the head coach again. I mean, you're coming back with that kind of a record, and you wonder what kind of respect he's gotten in the locker room. I mean, the players, they can read the papers too. They know what his record is. So that's another issue.
Well, we tell them all the time what the record is, so they know that for sure. John Dorsey, the new GM, made some headlines last week and raised some eyebrows with the comment to a radio station that his predecessor didn't get real players. And that's a comment that, it struck me as true, right? Because we've talked about it a million times how Sashi Brown did not do a good enough job in talent evaluation. But what did you think about those comments? Did they need to be said? Do you think he kind of crossed the line by saying that, especially when he has to walk into that locker room where the players, stand?
Yeah. I think this is such an extreme case of losing that there's almost no playbook for this.
Yeah.
I mean, you do what you want to do. I think what it really did was give us an early indication of what kind of personality Dorsey has, and it's kind of a no-nonsense approach. And I don't think he even cares if he insults anybody in the locker room, because in his mind he has an allegiance to none of those guys because he didn't bring any of them here. So why not put all your cards on the table, and if they get mad, well, play better and prove to me that you are a real player. So I had no problem with that, actually. I think it was blunt enough, and I think the fans maybe even was playing to the fans a little bit because all the fans are thinking that. So I thought it was maybe a little heavy-handed, and you don't see that a lot from executives in the NFL. But in this particular case, I thought it was fine.
I got you, and I think you're probably right. And what struck me is people would ask me, "Well, do you think the players are insulted or offended?" And what I think is the players think he's talking about everybody else but themselves. And I talked to Isaiah Crowell, and he said, "I completely agree with him. He's telling the truth." So, and I think Crow is a real player, and I think Dorsey would probably say that too. But even a guy like, pick player X on the roster. If you would ask him, I think he'd say, well, I'm a real player, but the guy next to me isn't, and that's why we're 0-14. And they just don't have the self-awareness to say, you know what, I'm one of those guys that might be cut next year. Yeah. A guy that probably won't be cut, at least not from a talent perspective, is Josh Gordon. He's been back for 3 games, obviously hasn't led him to a win. I guess 12 catches, 1 touchdown. Some people were wondering if he was engaged enough in the game Sunday. And when I would watch him, and I'm not watching just him, obviously, but you can see after a play and he'd kind of throw up his hands or look disgusted. To me, it was more frustration that either he wasn't getting the ball, the offense wasn't working, they were losing again. But what kind of sense do you get? Do you think Josh is engaged enough, and are you worried that he might be a malcontent given all the stuff that's gone on with him in the past and where the team is right now?
Well, I remember the last time he was playing for the Browns, he didn't seem like overly invested then either.
Right.
I mean, he was really had a big year that one year, but he didn't really seem too involved with his teammates and all that. But this is a part of the evaluation period in these remaining games for Josh Gordon. Not just how many passes do you catch, but are you a good teammate? Are you involved in this game? Do you throw up your hands when the ball being a typical wide receiver diva?
Sure.
So I think in his case it's even more extreme because he's a guy that's got to prove himself to be not just a good football player, but somebody they can count on off the field. So he probably is frustrated because he hasn't played in 4 years either, whatever it is. So I'm sure there's some frustration there, and how he handles it, I think, is going to be something the front office is going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Hugh Jackson kind of rebuffed those notions. He said, I think he's playing hard. He goes, I haven't had any issue with his hustle or competitiveness. He pointed out that on the Crowell long run, he was blocking way downfield. He took the cornerback out of the end zone on Duke's touchdown run. But it's something that definitely bears watching over the last couple of weeks, especially if he and Kaiser can't get on the same page. Speaking of DeShone Kaiser, Hugh Jackson mauled it, tried to decide whether or not to stick with them again against Chicago. He said he will, that he thinks DeShone Kaiser's up to the challenge to remain the starter. Jim, to me, that was the only move. As long as DeShone Kaiser's not crushed physically or mentally, emotionally, you have to keep him out there. There's no better option. He's a rookie. He's come this far. Do you agree with me there? And did you see any signs against the Ravens that maybe everything had become too much for the 21-year-old rookie?
Yeah, I agree with what you said, and I do think that some of that game, that Ravens game, was reflective of just the mounting woe is me-ism, and this whole organization really affected him in that game. It seemed to me. I mean, some of those passes were shockingly bad. Were just almost just throw it and hope. And I think of all the guys on the team, all the players on the team, the one that's most affected by the hiring of Dorsey is Kaiser, because clearly now he is not the guy that Dorsey wanted in here, and he's already said they need a lot of players, and maybe including a quarterback. So he's a guy who's probably battling internally. I got to get through 2 games here for a guy that maybe doesn't even want me around here next year. So that's a tough thing to handle, especially when you're not like coming into this thing as an elite quarterback that was expected to lead a team to the playoffs. So he's already got enough self-doubt going that this isn't going to help.
Well, you're right, and I feel bad for the kid. I mean, he's got a good life and he's making NFL money, but I'm sure he came in and he wasn't ready to start. Obviously, we've seen that, but he's forced into it. He took on the challenge, and I think at some point he's thinking, all right, even if I struggle this year, I'm going to get another chance. And maybe I figured out in year 2 or year 3 and I become the quarterback I expect myself to be. And now, just because it's a harsh reality of the NFL, the Browns are probably going to have at least two quarterbacks higher than him on the depth chart to start next year. He might not even be here. And the next chance he gets to start could be because of an injury to someone. And that's not how you build an NFL career, and it just changes that fast. And I'm sure that's one of the things going through his head, is as well as 0-14, 27-10, when they're losing to the Ravens and he throws that awful interception, just one of many awful interceptions. Well, Kaiser goes in to Chicago next week as a starter and will face Mitchell Trubisky, number 2 pick in the draft, another rookie. Jim, you watched him in high school when he played at Menor High. Mm-hmm. First of all, just your reflections on Mitch, and then do you think this is a chance for the Browns to get that long-awaited win and avoid 0-16 in the parade that would happen after the season?
Yeah, I did see Mitch in high school in a few games and was very impressed by not just his throwing and play on the field, but his maturity and intelligence and everything. He just seemed to have everything you look for in a quarterback, and I think I saw that also in his 1 year at North Carolina. I think he's being held back by the similar things that are going on here. He has no weapons in Chicago to help him out, so he's struggling a little bit there. I do think it's another opportunity to compare a guy that theoretically the Browns could have had instead of Kaiser. Right. But I think as far as the Browns' chances of winning this week, I think this is going to be maybe a real one of these real close games that they lose. But being on the road, and like we talked about a little bit last week, that I think that the morale on this team is probably not at an all-time high, understandably. So you're on the road, you're 1 week away from the end of the season. I just think it'd be a hard thing to see them suddenly win a game right at this point.
So you're locked in at 0-16.
0-16.
Right? You're 0-16. Well, I've been clinging to one win forever, so I'm not going to ditch it now. This has always been kind of the game you've been looking for to finally get that win. So I'm going to say Browns. Right now I'll say 17-16. Browns get the win, avoid the parade, another Christmas Eve win. I think Hugh's last 2 wins have come on Christmas Eve, stretching years. So that's what I'm saying. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, we'll be back next week from Stewart's TV and Appliance in the Sub-Zero Wolf Kitchen for another episode of Zone Coverage. Thanks for watching, and Merry Christmas.